Happy Wednesday. This is Angela Hooper-Menifield of Menifield Associates. And today is Wednesday, May 20th, 2020. This is your HR moment. And so today I wanted to go back to one of my favorite topics for a couple of reasons. One, I think this is a topic that we will continue to need to discuss just due to the economic climate that we currently have in the United States. I saw a report that my cousin Renee actually shared today that brought this to my mind, that IKEA was, I believe it was IKEA, right? No, not IKEA. Who was it that just closed their doors? I already forgot. So maybe I'll just go to Facebook and see what Renee posted. But what we know is companies are closing every day, right? Every day we're seeing a new post about a company or an organization that are closing their doors. And as a result of that, what is happening is more and more people are now without employment. And so as a result of that, more people will have to interview. I'm trying to look up Renee's post because you guys know I hate to be wrong. So what did she post? It says Pier 1. That's who I'm trying to think about. Pier 1 is who closed their doors. They are shutting down permanently. And that is something that unfortunately we're seeing a lot more of. Organizations that have made the decision due to a financial crisis that we're experiencing to close their doors and not resume their operations. And there was a part of me, and I thought about doing a different live, predominantly because I think sometimes when quote unquote rich people or organizations are broke and make decisions, we are less sympathetic. And I just thought to myself, like, does it matter if I make, if my rent is $100,000 or if my rent is $1,000? If I can't pay it, I can't pay it, right? I think I saw today on the news that the athletics baseball team were unable to pay the rent for their stadium. I think it was $1.2 million. And so I just say all that to say it's something to think about. Hey, Marquise, tell my grandboys I said hello and they should look at Nana on Facebook. But anyway, so interviewing skills. We talked about the different types of interviews. And again, people interview you because you like someone that they love. Friends interview friends, mates. In-laws interview you before you get into the family, right? So there's all types of interviews. I'm a private contractor. So for instance, I don't interview, hey, Marcia, I don't interview the same way another, somebody's looking for a job is. When I'm interviewing, I'm competing with other independent contractors so the organization or the decision maker can ascertain, is partnering with me a better decision, or will I help them overcome their pain points or help them deliver a result that they're looking to achieve, right? But it's still an interview. And so if you're a business owner and you think you don't need interviewing skills, again, I've said it once, I'll say it again, you are mistaken. But I am today specifically talking about people who are interviewing for a job. Because again, let's remind ourselves, over the last couple of weeks, we've seen the announcements. People are graduating from, high school, junior high, college, graduate school and whatnot. So what we know is approximately 4 million college graduates are entering, or quote unquote, we're planning to enter into the workforce come this spring. We also know that last I heard, it was approximately 34 million Americans who are now filing for unemployment due to some ramifications of COVID-19. In the month of April alone, the unemployment rate was 20 million and approximately 15%. So basically 15% of Americans apply for unemployment benefits. So when things begin to pick up or companies begin to hire people again, there will be an interview that has to take place. And I just kind of talked about this a little bit on LinkedIn, but I took a different approach. But the one thing my baby said, hey, Nana, see, now some of you may not know I have grandsons. And so you tell my babies I said hello. That just pretty much made my day right there. So the rest of this live has to go well. But what we know is that your resume, while again dynamic, it needs to get people's attention. It needs to express to the person who is filling the application or vetting the candidates that you have the core knowledge, skills, and abilities and expertise to fill the duties of the job, right? So that's number one. But all the resume does is that it gets you past the first level. But what happens after they look at your resume? Well, most times a company would call you in for an interview, whether you were local or out of town. If you were out of town and they were really interested in you, they would fly you in, bring you in, pay your expenses so that they could interview you. Well, right now we do know that that's not going to happen in that regard just because of COVID. But interviews are still taking place. People are still being hired. I was interviewed just last week for an opportunity. So again, interviewing is still happening. So the interview is what's going to determine if, one, you make the short list, or if you're able to, again, set yourself apart to the point where they want to offer you a job. Hey, Stacy, how you doing? I'm trying to wave at everybody. Hey, Albert. So we have to be ready for the interview. And there are some things that I think most people do really well, as in they work really hard on their resume. Oftentimes they will even pay people to help them develop their resume, right? Like they'll work with a resume worker. But how often have you heard someone say they worked with somebody to coach them for their interview? I would say it happens less times, percentage-wise, significantly less than it happens when people are actually getting assistance with a resume. We've somehow convinced ourselves that what's on paper and what we put in the mail or send electronically through, the World Wide Web or cyberspace is more important than what happens when we show up to represent ourselves. I tell people all the time, nobody, and I do mean nobody, can speak for Angela as well as Angela can. So I want the interview. Because as good as I can write and I can put together a pretty good resume, I know that I can, and I help my clients with them. When you meet me and you talk to me and there is synergy and a connection and you begin to learn more about me, you're going to want me for your job. Now, again, we're going to make some basic assumptions in my arrogance, right? If you think I'm arrogant. And that is the fact that I'm qualified. Right? I'm not in the room trying to sell you on selecting me if I'm not qualified. So if I'm qualified and all I have to do is convey to you the qualifications that I have, I'm in. I already know that. But why do I know that? Because I prepare and I practice. And so I'm talking to you about the types of questions that people ask in interviews, because guess what Angela wants you to do? Prepare and practice. So today we're going to talk about the 5 of the most common questions that people are asked in an interview. I think we all know what number 1 is, right? Tell me a little about yourself. In some form or fashion, in every interview, that question will be asked. And I can just tell you, as a person who, again, headed up interview panels for over 15 years, I've heard it all. I've heard everything from, I was born here and I have 5 sisters and 2 brothers. And, when I was little, I thought I wanted to be an architect. And then one day, it's like, okay, did you really just go left there? And it's everything from the very prim and proper, rehearsed, well, I got my bachelor's degree at so-and-so, so-and-so, and then I went here and went out there. And what I can tell you is this. Interviewers want to get to know you. So when they say, tell us about yourself, they really are not asking you to go into the weeds about your expertise. And here's why. They have other questions that are coming later to ask you about your expertise as it pertains to the job. So while you can briefly give them something, don't go in the weeds about your whole career. Well, I spent 5 years working here and I did 10 years over there. And then when I was the manager over here, they're thinking, well, okay, because what you'll find is, and this is how you'll know this is true. Think about this for a minute. As you went through the interview, you heard them ask a question, something like, and they prefaced the question with something like, while you touched on this a little bit already, could you tell us yada, yada, yada? In other words, when you answered that other question and started telling us about all this, that wasn't that question. You should have been telling us something else. That's really what they're telling you. So that's one question. Another question is, what are your greatest strengths and weaknesses? We always like to ask people to tell us about their strengths and weaknesses. Now, this is what you should never do. You should never tell people you don't have weaknesses, because you're displaying for them that you lack self-awareness. Everybody has weaknesses. I don't care who they are. A strong candidate would phrase their weakness as something that the manager or the hiring official would say, well, that's the worst thing that they do. And so oftentimes I say things like, there are times because I believe I can get everything right, or I can accomplish everything, that I don't sometimes, without the help of my team, know when to pull back or when to, say it's time to go a different direction. Or sometimes it's because I become a workaholic, right? Because I so want to get things done. Now, while they may not really want to workaholic, nobody's going to be mad at you because you want to work a lot, right? But some people sit in interviews and say stuff like, well, my weakness is I just don't talk real good in public. Or my weakness is I'm not a good writer. Okay, I appreciate your transparency, but really, did you really just tell me for this job that requires you to write instructions that you don't write well? And again, I'm making this up as I go, but that's my point, right? So that's one of the things I've seen. Okay, how have you dealt with conflict? That's typically a question, especially if you are interviewing for a job that is, I would call it public facing, as in you have to deal with conflict, or if it's a position that you may have to manage other people. So when they ask you, like, how did you deal with conflict? Tell them how you dealt with it. Think about a situation that you dealt with. Now, I'm sorry, I've had some things come to my memory as I said that out loud. I have heard people say in interviews things that they had as conflicts and how they dealt with them was illegal. Like, you would just be surprised. And I'm sitting there thinking like, did they really think this was a good question or a good answer? No. So when you talk about how you dealt with things, think about the fact that what you're talking about is we have conflict every day, but make sure you talk about what the resolution was. Like, was it resolved? Was it a win for the organization? Was it a win for you? Because if it wasn't, you didn't really resolve the conflict. Okay, number 4. How would your bosses or coworkers describe you? Now, this is a tricky one because oftentimes they take references. So while you wouldn't want to say everything that they may have said about you, you don't want to lie, right? So be really transparent, but also be selective in what you say in your transparency. So again, don't say everything, especially if it's not all good. But be honest, because again, if they take a reference and you're like, oh my gosh, my boss will tell you that I'm awesome, I'm a great employee, I'm always at work on time, I'm the first one in, the last one out. And then they do the reference check and the boss is like, who? Oh, yeah, I think I remember her. See, something right there already doesn't line up. And so it doesn't even have to necessarily be a lie, but it's a little bit exaggerated. So make sure you speak honestly, but then also that whoever you put down as a reference knows you. That's just an extra tidbit. Whoever you put down as a reference, make sure they know you did that. Okay. Number 5, why are you interested in this job? Or why should we hire you? So a why question means you need to defend that. Like, if we picked you right now, how would we defend that? If other people said, well, why did you pick her over me? well, number one, she has 2 degrees in human resources. She has over 20 years of experience. Da, 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 da. I mean, be able to run off your qualifications like that, okay? Not extensive long sentences. Get in, get out, chop, chop, let's go. But why would we hire you? Why should we select you? Why are you the best person for this role? Here's something else I know. If you don't believe you're the best person for this role, it doesn't matter what you say, they won't believe it either. And then they'll quickly say, all right, well, Angela, thank you so much for coming in. You have a good day. Because this interview ended up being a waste of their time. Because no matter how great you looked on paper, you didn't look that hot in person. So I leave you with this. You spend time working on your resumes, paying people to help you with your resumes. Get somebody to help you with your interviewing skills. Again, there are courses that are on demand, personal coaching. Now, am I plugging my services? Of course I am, because I know I am excellent at preparing people for interviews. And so if you want to work with someone that's going to be as passionate about you being selected, then, hit me up, message me, go to my website, book an appointment. But at the end of the day, we are in very challenging times, and people who are making the decisions, it's kind of like they say in the real estate industry, this is a buyer's market. So those who are buying have their pick of the litter, right? Because there's so many people who need jobs, many of which who are exceptionally qualified. So if you want to set yourself apart, you need to invest in doing the work that needs to be done to prepare yourself for an interview. Thank you, guys. My friend Linda didn't come on today. Oh, Linda, I missed you. But I hope this video has been of some assistance, and I'd love to hear your feedback and your comments and or how I might be able to help you along the way. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.